Welcome everyone. We are in the Frankly Speaking video series on youth participation, talking with Bastian Küntzel, our learning experience designer and facilitator, and we are going to focus a bit on the link between learning and participation, and also some very imaginative links between cooking and learning and possibly youth participation. So without further ado, let's learn a bit about Bastian.
I'm many things, but I guess in the context of this, I would say I'm a facilitator, and I facilitate learning, and I do that in many different ways and forms. So I work as a trainer, I work as a process facilitator when it comes to workshops or retreats or stuff like that. I'm an author. I wrote a book, which I hope facilitates learning as well, and those that read it. I'm a father. So I accompany to children as they grow up, and I hope my approach to that is facilitating their learning and growth as well. I'm a partner to a wonderful woman who I share a life with, and so all of these things, they are a part of who I am. I'm an active citizen, I hope, as well, and an activist in some areas as well. So in all the ways, I try to be someone who is a positive influence in other people's lives as much as I can. I think any structured learning experience, may it be a seminar, a training course, or a workshop, or even a university course, it works best if it is participatory. Right? So if the learning process is already designed in a way that is not necessarily about participation, but that just is designed through participation. And so this experience of being able to influence your own experience as a learner in what it is that you are experiencing there and what it is that you are learning there, and experiencing that you are not a consumer of something that you are given, but a co-producer of an insight that is there to be discovered. It's already a very empowering experience. Like, I remember when I was involved in international youth work, and I was going to youth camps, or just having a lot of fun, but not just fun for fun's sake, but also educationally planned fun in a way. I learned so much, and that experience was such a paradigm shift for me that when afterwards I was then in university settings or in school settings, and I was just asked to sit down and listen, it was very hard for me to respect that, because I had these experiences of, no, actually me being here matters in the process. And so you as my teacher better take me seriously because we're in this together. And I think the more we can give young people an experience of mattering and of being there as co-creators of a process that is there for them, the more we decrease the tolerance of not being heard and of not being able to participate. So in very concrete terms, we have a team development training format that is called the cook-off, where we go with a group of people into a kitchen, like a cooking studio, which normally functions as a cooking school. And we use the act of cooking in a way, as a simulation of what happens in a work environment in a team, because there's a lot of parallels there. Right, you have to coordinate, you have to delegate, you have to have all of these different aspects that need different timings and different competencies, but they all need to come together at the same time, because otherwise it's not a full dish. And so this medium of cooking, it just has a lot of components to it that happen in everyday work life as well. And so it's just a very useful thing. And also in a lot of these team development methods, like building a spaghetti tower or all these very typical exercises. The final result doesn't really matter all that much if your tower is high or tall, like it just symbolically matters. But if you're cooking together, the results actually matter because you're going to eat it, right? So there's a higher stake. And also, I believe there's a very primal thing about cooking for and with one another. Like it's something that normally happens only in a family or in a group of friends, but it's something very intimate. Like you touch things and then someone else puts those things in their mouth. Like it's very intimate. And so there is something on a very primal level when people cook together and when they cook for each other and when they cook with each other, that just creates a bond between people that is difficult to do in other settings. And so that's another component to it. Cooking is also an inherently generous act, right? You do something that nourishes others, literally, right? You give life to others, literally. And so just not even by making it about that, but just it's very underlying there that when you cook for someone, it is an act of love, right? When you cook with each other, there is generosity in there. And to provide a team with that experience, it's something very deep and meaningful and beautiful, even though it can be experienced as just simply fun and nice and delicious. But I think something happens on an unconscious level there that is like there's one beautiful example where we did that with a team from a software company, and they wanted to have a fun evening together. And so we did this activity, and then one of those participants, half a year later, he contacted me and he said, "Hey, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and we don't want to make a big thing, but this cooking together that really stayed with me. Do you think we could do that, like with our wedding guests, that we just cook together? Because we don't want to go to a restaurant and just eat, but this was so beautiful. Could we do this?" And then we did this, and so we had this wedding celebration where people cooked the wedding meal together, and it was extremely beautiful. Last year I published a book called The Learner's Journey, which is about a framework that I developed over a couple of years that uses storytelling as a design principle to create learning experiences. And the basic premise is that memory generation is in story form generally. Like people experience meaningful things that happen to them in story form as a narrative, with themselves as a protagonist of that experience. And so my thought was, if people experience, or if people remember learning experiences anyway in story form, maybe we can tag onto that and simply create learning experiences as a story. And not with any kind of like, okay, you are now a hero and you go on a journey and make that explicit, but implicitly to use the basic steps of storytelling that are framed in a concept called the hero's journey or the story circle, to use those basic steps as design principles of creating an overall learning experience. And I've done that with like half-day learning events, but also with semester-long university courses, and it works really well. And so I wrote a book about it to offer this framework to also other people who might be interested in it. Most reactions I've gotten so far was from trainers who are not necessarily always in the category of young people, but who and it resonated with a lot of them, because it's how a lot of people already intuitively design learning experiences. But what this gave to them, what they've told me, what it gave to them was an explicit framework that they can use to kind of guide their own thinking process. And so it goes from intuitive to conscious and purposeful and yeah. just with more intentionality in a way. And so I've had very positive responses from people from all kinds of sectors that have been using this and found it to be useful. So that's really nice.
Perfect.
And the other thing that you mentioned throughout, the lockdown of this global pandemic, as apparently very, very many people, I've started a podcast. Because what else are you going to do when you are stuck at home? So it's really interesting. Global podcast consumption has gone way down because people aren't commuting anymore, but global podcast production has gone way up because people are stuck at home. So I've also started a podcast called Learner Journeys, and it's interviews with different people who facilitate learning in different contexts. So I've had a professor, a trainer, facilitator, coach, human library activist and organizer, who talk about, in a way, their own learner journey and how they've ended up where they are now and ended up at doing what they are doing now, but also talking about their approaches and what they've learned about learning that could be interesting and relevant for other people who facilitate learning as well. In Europe, we've had a narrative for a while that racism is an American problem and not a European problem, and I think we need to have a very hard look at that. I think that we've been kind of living in this fairy tale of, oh, Europe is so nice and Europe is so democratic and Europe is so open and Europe is, the example of best practice in global governance. And I think it's not. And I think the more honest we are about that, the better we are going to be in going into a direction that is more equitable for more people. So this is one thing that I think we need more anti-racist work in Europe. We need more anti-racist education in Europe, and also more feminist work, particularly among men in Europe. So this is one major thing. And I think at the end of the day, I think something that we need to keep reminding ourselves is that being allowed to accompany someone else's learning process is a privilege and is something that requires thankfulness and humility on the side of those that get to facilitate it, that we get to be in this position of generosity and do this loving act of accompanying someone else's learning journey. And I think it's important to just remember that.